Hello, and welcome to the webinar, Supercharging QuickBooks to Control and Manage Cash Flow. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have a few administrative details to share with you, then we'll dig into our discussion. First, we'd like to thank Sun Team for their partnership with today's event. They've been wonderful thought leadership partners to Argyle, and they're committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. Thank you again to Sun Team. We appreciate your joining us today. We welcome you to stay connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forum. I also wanted to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we've curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from our members. Argyle is very proud and protective of this policy, as it reflects our commitment to ensure the neutrality and overall value of the content presented at our events. We've worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, please submit all questions that come up during today's event into the chat section of the interface. Before we start our discussion, I'd like to have our speakers introduce themselves. Sergio, let's start with you, please.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everybody. My name is Sergio. I'm the VP of Product at Centeam. I've been in the industry for about 13 years now. Prior to Centeam, I've been with a large UK bank, and we started Centeam in 2019 when I joined. And since then, we've been basically building a cash flow management and control solution, which drives part of the discussion today. So very pleased to be here and look forward to sharing some thoughts about that very important part of a business's financial processes.
Great, thank you. Melissa, can we continue with you, please?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. My name is Melissa Sanford-Torres, and I'm the founder and CEO of MSV Financial Services. We provide bookkeeping through fractional CFO work for small businesses and startups, primarily in the New York City area, but we have clients all over the nation. I'm here from a client or a advisor perspective from a speaker standpoint, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you guys today about cash flow.
Great, thank you. And Nick, let's conclude our introductions with you, please.
For sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Nick Ashley. I'm a senior financialist here at Abacus Insights. I started my career off working in healthcare for Athena Health on their FP&A team. I spent about 4 years after that working for an ed tech startup. Basically one of the first in-house hires there, going through all the accounting, cash flow, finance, FP&A functions. And I've been at Abacus now for about a year and a half. Looking forward to growing and still managing cash and just working through all of our financials. So excited to be here and looking forward to this.
Great, thank you. Let's begin our discussion. Our first question for the day is, to start off, what do we mean when we say cash flow management? Melissa, can you lead off the response to this question?
Yeah, it's an interesting question and great question to start off with. So to me, cash flow management means really having a critical eye on managing cash inflows, cash outflows, really understanding what it is when you have due dates coming in, so you know when you can actually use that cash for the cash that you need to spend on your vendors and payroll. It's really difficult when you don't understand those due dates and when you actually need to make those payments, because you can get into a bind pretty quickly if you don't manage that from either a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. Nick, what do you think?
No, I think you're spot on there, Melissa. I think when I think of it, I think a lot about predictability. I think about always having a good grasp on your cash balance, current state, as well as in the next 30, 60, 90 days. I also think there's looking at things on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a quarterly basis, right? You always need to be looking forward when you're receiving bills, when due dates are coming, as well as when AR is coming in. I think that it's also about not biting off more than you can chew. Really understanding as your invoices come in, you prioritize those, look at the due dates, and really just plan out that based on their payment terms, right? Maybe it's, something's net 30 or net 15, you can play around with that. But I also think it's really about improving metrics, looking at DSO, looking at DPO, really just understanding the ins and outs, and that will help you predict your cash flow even more in the future, which will just allow you to have a more firm and a more confident standpoint of knowing your ins and outs there.
Sergio, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, you guys are the experts, right? Doing this day in, day out. But I would like to provide like an adjacent lens to this, which is that what you guys are describing sounds simple, but I think it's very, very complicated because of all the interconnected aspects of cash flow. I mean, you talked about timings, daily, weekly, monthly. You talked about AP. You talked about AR. You talked about payroll. You talked about how things connect to each other, and that I think in practice is actually quite complicated to do, and do it in every small business with any degree of financial expertise and so on and so forth. And something that we find a lot when we speak to clients, when we do research and so on and so forth, is that everybody understands revenue. Everybody gets it about how to sell more, how to find more customers, how to drive more revenue, top line, and everybody's like very much into let's drive more acquisition, let's drive more revenue. And many people still don't look at cash flow, and cash flow is the blood life of the business. And what from a technology provider point of view, what we notice is that businesses are very much focused on technology that helps manage revenue, CRMs, e-commerce platforms, advertising platforms. Everybody's an expert, right, on LinkedIn, Google, LinkedIn ads, and so on and so forth, and Sales Navigator. But then when they ask when you ask some, I guess, Melissa, when you ask some of your clients, what's your cash runway? Does anybody have an answer to that? And I think
No,
yeah. Tell me, no, tell me.
Well, you're right. They all look to me to answer that question. And in all reality, I feel like that's too late when they ask me. They need to have those tools ahead of the game, or ahead of time, to really make a decision. Because I think that's the critical part. But I agree with you. Happens all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, my 2 cents, our perspective is that cash flow many times and cash flow management is an afterthought. It comes up retrospectively. It comes up when there is a cash crunch happening, but it's not something which is like an ongoing proactive activity. It's not something that happens really in a standardized process, bringing all those interconnected parts together. So I think that's kind of our definition of cash flow management is bringing all those pieces together, but also being very proactive and not waiting until there is a problem that you need to fix.
Totally agree.
Great, thank you. The next question is, has COVID changed how businesses think about cash flow management and where it lands on their list of priorities? Melissa, can you lead off that response to this question as well?
Yeah. So if anyone has, I mean, we've all experienced this. COVID has changed everything when it comes to business. I have clients of course, you hear supply chain issues, right? You don't have a product to come into your business. You don't have a product to sell. Then you have to pay suppliers. Then you have to pay your employees. It's all a critical mass right now to really try to drive the behavior right from your suppliers, your vendors, your clients. And yeah, there's definitely a priority when it comes to cash flow management. A lot of, Sergio, you brought this up earlier, is, what's your burn rate? Companies want to know exactly what they're burning on a monthly basis to see if they can survive. I haven't had this much scrutiny when it comes to cash flow in the past, but now these days it's a daily, if not daily reminder that we have to keep on managing cash, and it's difficult. And I know we'll talk about that later, but if anything, cash flow is, I would say, the first thing on the priority list for my clients.
Nick, what do you think?
No, I totally agree. And I think that it varies industry to industry. I think it varies on size of business. I think all of those are really important factors. But I think, as Melissa was saying too, I think that, and Sergio was saying in the prior question, right? Cash flow hasn't always been a top priority, but COVID forced people to really start diving into cash flow. They forced you to understand, hey, like when I was working in a previous role, right? All of our payments came from government agencies. When they shut in schools, when they shut down, they couldn't write checks. They weren't sending ACHs. So that, is a big factor in us receiving our money and our funds, which in turn then flows through to, we've got bills that we've got to pay. So how do we manage those? I think that it brought to light a much greater understanding, or at least the want and the need to understand the ins and outs of cash, and to really make sure that it was a top priority, because there were some businesses that do have a lot of cash on hand. And when COVID hit, it might have been different for them because they were still able to pay their bills and wait on delayed payments that were coming in. We have other businesses that really have to run cash pretty thin, right? Their cash comes in and they pay their bills out. And for those folks, that's where it really kind of put them in a position where they really had to determine, how are we going to be paying these things? What does our cash look like, again, on a weekly, a daily basis, as well as forecasting out to a quarterly? So it really turned into a huge exercise that I think is going to benefit many, many businesses because of the exercises that they went through.
Great, thank you. Sergio, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I obviously I agree with what you guys said, but I think two things I want to mention. One is that we've also seen on the flip side that businesses that had a handle over cash flow did manage to really fare through the pandemic and actually leverage the opportunities that came up during the pandemic because of their already being ready to go after these opportunities by having a handle on their cash. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is that managing cash flow is not only about surviving. Yes, of course it is about surviving, but it's also about being able to spot the opportunities and grow your business. Because when you have available cash and when you properly manage the cash conversion cycle, you unlock working capital and you're able to grow the business and to basically leverage opportunities that come up. So what I'm saying is that it's not only doom and gloom, it's also something that can open up opportunities. I mean, would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would say, if anything, definitely not doom and gloom, but when some people look at cash or they think about cash, it's scary, right? They see a lot of things going out. They see a lot of things, maybe not coming in quickly. So to your point, this is just more or less a tool to help you, right? Cash flow management is a tool to help you grow or to help you succeed, to help, to pivot, make, immediate decisions on how you can, improve operations, et cetera. So anyways, I agree with you on that, but it's powerful.
I mean, relating to this point we're discussing now, if you ask a business owner, or if a business owner says, "Oh, we have too much cash, we don't need to manage cash flow," what would you answer to that?
For me, I'd say that one of the points that I was going to talk to earlier, and Melissa, you brought up, was if you're right away, let's say you raise a round of money and you have all this cash inflow, you should be starting, right, managing cash from that point forward, because if you wait too long, it can be too late. So I think that cash management and watching your cash flow, watching the ins and outs is something that you just need to do from start to finish all the time. And it's not just something you do at the end of a quarter, at the end of a year, or when you've got a ton of money or don't have a ton of money. I just think that it's just something that you always have to have tabs on at all times.
To your point on having too much cash, I think that you should, most businesses shouldn't have too much cash, meaning, right, you should be reinvesting in your business and understanding where to use the money, right? Because I think if it was just being holed up, right, in a savings, it wouldn't be doing any benefit, right, to your business. So great point on that, as no matter what end of the spectrum you're in, you still need to manage it to the best ability for your business and your goals, et cetera.
Makes sense. I mean, one thing I would add is a snippet. It's a soundbite. From a relationship manager in a bank in the Midwest, who we were discussing about, his clients and businesses ranging from a couple of $1 million up to $25-30 million of revenue, and we're discussing about cash flow, and he said, you know what, the best time for a business to start thinking about establishing processes around cash flow management is when they have a lot of cash and they don't have any cash flow problem. Because if they do that when the problem comes, it might be too late.
Yeah.
And that was like an excellent kind of snippet, because there is this perception that, oh, there's too much cash and it's all good and let them pay late. I just don't buy that personally.
Thank you. The next question is, what are the main challenges in in managing cash flow in small and medium businesses? And how does your business address them? Nick, can you start the response to that question, please?
Sure. So it's got kind of what I was talking about before about managing money as soon as you basically get it in when you go through a raise. That's where it should really be focused. And Sergio, that's a great point that you just mentioned as well. Just you should be focusing on that. You want to invest it, but you want to invest it properly in the right way. And you also want to understand the implications of when you're investing in it, whether it's hiring folks or to vendors, whatever that might be. You want to make sure that you're understanding when things are paid, if it's going to be a 6, 12, multi-year commitment, because that also ties things up, because you might make an initial investment, but if it's a 3-year term, that's going to actually be multiplied by 3. So you kind of have to play all of those pieces in. For us personally, we complete weekly cash, basically daily cash management is what we call it. We complete it on a weekly basis. And it's something that's really important, because what we want to do is we want to see what are the ins and outs of our business on a daily basis, but we also want to be able to raise it up to leadership. We want to be able to talk with folks and make sure that everyone involved is understanding how the cash is flowing through. It's important, and obviously for folks in finance to understand it, but it's also really important for the business to understand it, because they need to be able to make decisions, whether you're going to make future investments, hiring folks, whatever that is. There's always a cash implication there. But there's another aspect of it, right? There's having that detailed view that folks in finance that you're seeing the transactions being deducted or seeing the invoice payments come in. But you also need a holistic view, right? Like, you don't need to bring all of the details fully up to leadership. You need to bring the kind of like the big pillars up to say, hey, here's what's going on. We want to make this investment. These are the implications. Or we can now move forward with something else along those lines, a different investment. I think that's all super, super important there. But I also think that depending on your business and your industry, your collections as well as your payables could be very lumpy. You could have businesses that have full upfront annual fees, so you're getting a lot of cash in once, twice, 3 times a year, or you might have other businesses where they're getting monthly invoices paid. So really, it's also understanding how your cash is coming in and then pairing that with when your payables are going out. So yeah, that's my piece there.
Melissa, can you add on to that a little bit, please?
Yeah, well, Nick made some great points there, but at least from an operational standpoint, the challenges that I see from a cash flow perspective is really communication between departments. So many stakeholders are making decisions on their own, and not necessarily on their own, but in their own silo, negotiating contracts, their term dates of when, term payments are due. On the AR side, the sales team may be negotiating different longer lead times for cash, for client payments to come in. All of those components rarely sometimes get up to finance until it's too late. And so to bridge the gap between the operational team and finance has always been a challenge, especially when businesses are moving so quickly. I mean, if those on the call are on startups, I feel like decisions are pivoted are being made daily every second, and then they change, rapidly, pretty quickly, and you don't know how to manage that without having the sorts of communications in line, or at least a better understanding, right, of what's happening across the board, across your business. So that's been a huge challenge. And then how I try to address it is really, again, communication, making sure that we're getting real-time data, or try to, and asking the right questions, so that we're coming up with the right decisions for our cash flow management, whoever's involved.
Yeah, I think Melissa, you mentioned the point about like all the different departments or that are involved in the cash flow management process. I think it goes back to the interconnected part of the interconnected elements that make basically cash flow. So Nick, you talked about payments coming in from customers being lumpy, not being able to understand, at least predict when these are going to come in, basing decisions based on due dates, all of that, not assessing the impact of late payments to cash flow. That is one, big thing. And the challenge is how to do this in a scalable fashion. A business that has small business with, potentially not a dedicated receivables AR staff or a collections person, being able to do all of those things and at scale and every day, even for 30, 40, 50 invoices a month, it can be a very cumbersome process, and people don't do it. And on the flip side, we'll talk about AP, but making payments to suppliers, it could be, it could be a strategic way of unlocking cash flow. But nobody really thinks about a payment as a way to really maximize the cash flow of the business, unless there is a very, very, defined problem that they're trying to solve, which is basically delay every payment. And another angle, which might not have been very much a reality in the last couple of years with PPP, but it is a reality, is that businesses that don't plan their cash or don't look at their cash flows regularly, they might end up turning into very expensive sources of credit because they're trying to plug in gaps that they would have anticipated otherwise. So expensive credit is out there. There's a lot of expensive credit out there that is a result of not managing cash flow proactively and not really anticipating the need for credit when the time comes. So I think all these interconnected parts is basically what creates the challenge, and doing this in a dynamic way with ever-changing data every single day, with many different stakeholders, internal and external, that need to communicate effectively. It's like, I'll give you a parallel. I'll go back to my example that I had 2 minutes ago, which is, imagine you are running like a business in the 21st, I don't know, whatever century we're in, 2022, and you're running a business, you're selling, and let's say you're selling to other businesses, and you're running your business on Excel without having a CRM, without having Salesforce or HubSpot or something to manage your customers. I mean, it would be a mess, right? Marketing wouldn't know what's happening, sales wouldn't know what's happening, and the account managers wouldn't know what's happening. So it's why is cash flow different? Why does cash flow still need to happen within Excel? Why does cash flow still need to happen in a very siloed process, cash flow management? So I think that's our thought and perspective is that in the cash flow management space, the challenge we talked about can easily be overcome by having system process in place to do this proactively, to do this on an ongoing basis, daily, weekly, monthly, depending on the circumstances of the business, but have a system and a process in place to do it. And do that in a very much integrated fashion with your existing technology stack. And I think that's where we talk about QuickBooks, we talk about the existing financial source of truth of the business, being able to complement that with a purpose-built way to manage cash flow is what we feel and hope that is the answer about this this problem around cash flow that will keep coming up. And I hope that businesses don't forget after COVID goes away that this thing actually happened.
Totally. And one thing just that I'll add there, Sergio, is like when you think of things, a lot of smaller companies that, right, like in startups and maybe pre-Series C companies, you're wearing so many hats, right? You're in the business, but you're doing so many different things that if you are not actively if you don't have a system in place like a Send team or something along those lines, right? Like it's all manual, and that can take, depending on the amount of ins and outs of your cash on a daily or weekly basis, that could take hours, right? But to be able to, so then it's extracting the data, it's analyzing the data, and then it's producing the data. So there's kind of 3 steps. Whereas a system that's linked to things, that's linked to your bank, that's linked to your GL, that has all this right in place, it's going to auto-populate and just kind of give you a nice view of what's going on, help you forecast out maybe monthly or quarterly recurring payments that just allows you to truly understand your cash balance without being like, I forgot to add in 3 weeks, hard code in a number that I think a bill's going to be, right? And that's where you can be off there. But that's where I think Send team is just like a great product for that.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what are the biggest mistakes you've made or seen businesses make around cash flow management? And I want to call the audience's attention to the poll on the right-hand side of your screen. Nick, can you take the lead on that question, please?
For sure. So a lot of things that we've kind of been talking about through here is making sure that you're focusing on your burn right off the bat. Some folks, for example, when we were going through a raise here for our Series B, it was right in the beginning of COVID. And we basically, as we're negotiating and going through things, we had to run cash flow, runway analyses and looking at those types of things. And luckily we were able to be going through that during a raise, and it was all top of mind for us. But folks that aren't looking out in the future, that's where they get caught up. I also look at things where if you're looking at, let's say, you have a software vendor that you're looking to to purchase. If you purchase a 3-5 year deal or multi-year deal, you're going to get more of a significant discount. But it's going through your payables and really understanding what's a need at the current point. And you might be signing up for a long-term contract where the business might change based off of the direction that they're going to go, and then you're in the hole for a contract for a longer period of time. But I think overall, it just brings back the whole point that we've been talking about, is like a lot of mistakes is just that people aren't talking about it. It's not being brought up. It's not discussed. And because of that, people don't know about it. And then they're making decisions without having the proper tools or the proper understanding of cash. So I think that is kind of the root there.
Great. Melissa, can you share your perspective on this question with us?
Yeah, well, again, Nick made great points, but just to add on to that, a lot of people are just afraid to, look at either the system that they have or their Excel spreadsheet. Sometimes, when you're looking at so many Excel spreadsheets, it's just a sheet and you don't know how to react anymore, or it's just like that normal report that you get. And people are not asking questions on what they mean, how to make decisions off of it. And some mistakes that I've seen even from clients are just not asking, the right questions from who's this vendor, who's this client, why am I paying for this? And they're just letting it flow from there. So I think the biggest thing, if anything, to mitigate that is, having something automated, having something in front of you that's easy to digest, because a lot of times, if anyone is in finance and accounting, right, it's very complex. You can have multiple financial statements and multiple reports being handed to you, but really at the end of the day, you need something that is tangible to make a decision on. And that's what I've seen in at least my client work, is they just don't have that tool to make a good decision.
Sergio, what do you think?
I mean, the guys covered everything, right? And who am I to know?
Yeah.
Melissa managed so many people, and Nick does it himself day in, day out. But it's about like not having the mistake is not knowing the importance of doing it regularly, proactively, and setting up a process to do it, and to forecast, to proactively manage, know what's happening, what's going out, and forgetting about, like, within the day-to-day craziness, forgetting about how important cash flow is for a business to survive, and only remembering it, when something happens. I think that's my own addition to what you guys said. But it's all about, what you guys said.
And one more thing I just add there is, I think a lot of it is, we talk about looking at a full picture of things. You have cash in the bank, you're investing in people, you're hiring folks. That's awesome. But really understanding the other pieces of the pie that go into hiring someone, right? The onboarding, thinking of if there are a bunch of licenses, different systems access. A lot of these systems contracts are per user license based. So a lot of costs can go in there. So I feel like sometimes businesses, as they're growing super quickly, they don't realize all of the costs that go in, especially around a headcount investment area.
Great, thank you. The next question is, we often hear that the majority of small businesses still don't regularly forecast their cash flows. Sergio, can you lead off on this question? And also there's a poll on the right-hand side of your screen.
Yeah, it's a great question, Eric. And it ties back to kind of the whole discussion we're having until now, which is that still many businesses don't see the need or don't have the appropriate advice of how much it is required to regularly forecast cash flows. And there are two aspects about not forecasting cash flows on a regular basis. One is limiting the business's ability to grow, and the other is obviously not anticipating when something bad might happen from a cash flow point of view. So not knowing when people are going to pay you late, not knowing when you have payments to make, not knowing how vendor payments could impact your payroll payment, if a receivable that gets delayed from a significant customer. All of these things are, really inhibiting a business's ability to grow and to preempt bad situations. The reality is that, why though? Why? One part is, that it's not considered or has not been considered so far to be a very important priority for a business, and other things always have taken priority. But also it's complex. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. I think, Melissa, you said that people are afraid to look. it's very complex. And even for a small business that does, a bunch of payments a week and receives a bunch of payments every week, it is complex to put all of those things together, particularly if you need to do it manually. You need to spend like a couple of hours just pulling in data. And as you said, Nick, the first step is pulling, then it's analyzing, and then it's like producing. So, and the reality is that, accurate, dynamic, real time, based on real time data forecasting is outside of the functionality of commonly used accounting systems. It's not what accounting systems, general ledgers, are built to do. They're purpose built to be the financial source of truth. They're purpose built to be the system of record for the business, but they're not built to be proactive forecasting tools. And that's why many businesses, as we also see in the poll which is running, is that still use Excel to forecast cash flows once whenever they have the time. So our perspective is that forecasting should be continuous. It should be something that people do very regularly. I mean, in your case, Nick, for example, you said we look at our ins and outs daily. It should be daily. It should be automated to happen daily. It should be automated to happen on a very frequent, proactive basis, and it provides a compass for finance teams to make the right decisions at the right time, and also becomes a very helpful tool for CPAs, because we know that CPAs are trying to become a lot more advisors and less doers, because technology is coming to substitute the doer side of things. So it provides CPAs, at least that's our perspective, and Melissa, I'd love to get your opinion on that. A key tool in your toolkit to help advise customers, your clients, to make the most of what they have at their disposal, the blood of the business cash.
Yeah, I completely agree. But if anything, so to your point, yes, most businesses are just intimidated, or they just base it off of their bank account, right? A lot of businesses out there, they have access to their checking account balance. They know when payroll is going to go out. They know when they have to make a credit card payment, and they know, generally, right, when a vendor has to get paid on a monthly basis. It's assuming that their business is streamlined and consistent, going forward. But then it's like the real magic to that is the details behind that. Is, are we spending too much money on this vendor? Are we spending too much money on X? Can we change this on the client side? And that's where I think people need to forecast even more for that. Because it's not just managing from a bank statement standpoint. It really is being granular and understanding it from a forecast side. To your question on being a CPA advisor, 100%. I guess my job is definitely getting easier with automation, but somebody has to translate that, right? When you're providing a solution like either a dashboard tool, right, or even a chart, sure, there's a pretty picture when the chart's actually going up, but you don't know why, right? You have to understand why it's going up so you can make decisions, or why it's going down. So, anyways, I do agree that. It's just an educational tool, right? People just need to be okay with seeing what's behind the scenes, understanding what is being calculated in a cash flow tool or a cash flow model or forecast, and then reacting in that way.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you both on that. And Melissa, to your point, I think of, when in my role, right, when I'm looking at the stuff and I'm looking at cash, or I'm looking at any of these things, I know the details, but I need to know the details for my role. But rolling them up to leadership, they need to know what's going on from a high level perspective, but they don't need to know every single in and out. So it's very important to have a system, or to be able to use something that either sits within your ERP or something along those lines that you can drill into, that you can easily and quickly get access to, and then look at it. Okay, let's drill in. We want to see, the receivables or the payables here. What are they? That makes sense. It was X, Y, and Z. I think when thinking of the question that we were chatting about here, I think a lot of people just don't understand that they actually have control over the cash flow. Like there's a lot of, you can from a receivables perspective, you can do collections and reach out and make sure that you get paid on time. But from a payables perspective, you can really look and say, all right, like we know it's net 60 terms, right? Or during contracting, you can work through terms of like, all right, our payables will be net 30 or net 45. And all of that really, really plays a part in cash flow management, because you're able to say, if you're using consultants and they bill in arrears, right, you're basically getting the service for 30 days. And then if you have net 60 terms on top of that, you're getting another 60 days until you have to make that payment, which can allow you the flexibility to play around with cash. But the other piece too is, a lot of times it's always, and we were touching on this earlier, a lot of times when you're looking at cash, you're looking at the end of the month when you're closing the books and you're going through the details, right? You're not necessarily looking at those details weekly or on any other more frequent basis. And by that time, some of the stuff is already in motion. You can't really make any adjustments. You can't really course correct. And I think that if you were doing something, or you had a system or something along those lines that you had access to quicker and more frequently, you could really course correct a lot of things ahead of time, and really kind of pave that path yourselves, opposed to having that path paved for you.
Yeah, and I think the key for me and for us here is leveraging technology, and technology has made significant advancements, as you know. And we hear about this, fancy ML, machine learning, kind of, and artificial intelligence and all this fancy stuff. But the reality is that being able to, at scale, look at historical trends and predict the future, which is what machine learning does, is a very interesting or important or advancement of technology to help do forecasting at scale of cash flows. And connecting that to the other key elements of cash flow, which is payables, receivables, late payments, banking fees, all these kind of things together, through technology can create what you just talked about, Nick, which is like a continuous proactive process, as opposed to something that happens very infrequently, or it's just like a chore, as opposed to a really value-adding exercise a business goes through.
Totally.
Thank you. So our next question is, what's your perspective on cash flow forecasting and how important it is? There is also a poll that goes with this question. Nick, can you start us off on that question, please?
Definitely. I think it's extremely important. This is something specifically here at Abacus. It's a board level focus. We're always going through cash runway. We're always going through cash reporting. I think of the way that we want to give visibility up to leadership and to the board. And on top of that, things that I think of is, we talked about the daily cash management that we'll be pulling through. We also, when we're doing our financials, we have GAAP, non-GAAP, as well as cash accounting, basically. So we look at those things, so we can kind of have a holistic view on a monthly basis of what's the timing of different large ticketed items bucketed by expense type. And I think that it just provides us more visibility, allows us to really understand what's going inside and out, because with accounting, you've got the GAAP accounting, right? And that shows you what your expenses are over certain periods of time, but it's not going to show you truly what the cash in or cash out is. And at the end of the day, cash is super important. If you don't have cash in the bank, how are you going to make decisions or make investments? That's what you need. So I think it's something that I've been fortunate enough to be very involved in here at Abacus and in previous roles as well. And it's something that any company or folks I work with or speak with, I just talk about how important that cash, and if we want to call it cash accounting, really, really is on just understanding it to really help drive the business and scale the business as it grows.
Melissa, how about you?
Yeah, well, from an advisory perspective, or at least, with my clients, cash flow forecasting is really the first thing I talk about. And then I really talk through where we're going from a business standpoint, what you're going to spend on, what's coming up, what the issues are. And then I lead into the financials, because to your point, Nick, from the accounting standpoint, it's historical. You've already done it. You've already spent it. There's nothing you can do about it. It's almost like, it's the past. It's really making the difference on the changes, going forward. And if anything, that's the first thing people say. I mean, we've kind of beat a dead horse here is, what's my burn? What can I spend on the next day? Where can I pivot? Where can I save money? But it's super important. And so it's always part of my, honestly, daily, weekly, monthly reporting packages when it comes to my clients.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked. I think we've talked about cash flow forecasting quite a bit. We passionately believe it's very, very important, and that's why we do what we do. And we think that we strongly believe that every single business should have a grip on forecasting cash flows on a regular basis, based on a systematic process and tools that help them do this in an easy, automated, and very transparent way. So that's what we strongly believe, and I personally think that the market will go there, and whilst COVID is fresh, and this fancy forecasting, machine learning kind of things are really new. I cannot see a business 5 years from now not having a tool that helps them forecast cash flows.
Great. The next question is for Nick to lead off on. We understand that late payments are a normal situation for small businesses. Should businesses keep an eye on how receivables can impact their cash flow and how they can get ahead of late payments, even businesses that don't have dedicated accounts receivable staff?
Yeah, so I think you're going to have different industries, different vendors, different circumstances. One of the things that I've seen across all, though, is making sure you have the correct contact person. If you don't have, when you have the account management team or the sales team, they might be working with one contact at a client or a vendor. And if that is a very large corporation, they might not be the one that's signing off on the invoice. There might be a separate person that's processing the payment. So really working with the folks on your team to understand who is the best contact person when I need to follow up on payment, who can I get to that will be able to give me the answer right off the bat. Because I feel like sometimes you have to go through channels of it's this person, it's this person, it's this person, which just delays the process there at that point in time. There's other ways, right? Using systems that can send collections reminders 2 weeks before payments due, a week before payments due, payment due date, those types of things, where if you don't have a large team, if you're able to leverage a system, that can really reach out and help you stay in contact, assuming, again, you have that right contact in the system, that they can just kind of interact with them or get those automatic reminders, which will help you bring in that cash. I think another thing is really understanding the contract language, right? When you can bill, is it based off of milestones? Is it based off of deliverables? And really just staying on top of that, because, we've talked about smaller companies or smaller businesses wearing so many hats. You might not always be thinking, hey, or if you don't have a CRM or a platform, hey, this contract is up for invoice. Always just making sure that you have it documented so you can go through and send those invoices in a timely manner, because then you'll be able to collect in a timely manner. And yeah, I think those are the main things that folks can focus on there.
Melissa, how about you? What's your answer to this question?
I mean, Nick stole the show here. I agree with everything that he said. Basically, the biggest thing here is if you don't have an AR team, it really is important to automate and get your processes in place, because if those aren't correct, it can really stretch out the lead time of when you're actually going to get cash in. I have some clients that are in a paid when paid situation. So, for example, if a vendor that they have won't get paid until a client pays them, and it's critical, because then you can ruin a relationship pretty quickly if the vendor can't get paid and the other client is delayed in paying you. So there's a catch-22 here. It really is, again, people pay late primarily either, right, they don't have a process in place. We're not getting it ahead of time from an information standpoint, meaning we're not getting the right billing contact, like you said, Nick. We don't understand the contract, or we're just trying to mitigate some cash flow stress needs, stressful situations where we're just delaying the cash payment out. So, anyways, I agree. Happens all the time, but you need to watch out. You need to track your receivables quickly before it gets out of hand.
It's funny. Two kind of sound bites I want to give. One is that there are a lot of research online. Obviously, nowadays you can find anything you want. Has been, somebody has looked into it. But there's a research coming out every year about late payments, obviously, because can be a big impact for the US economy. And I've been reading something from, I think, 2018 or 19 now, which talked about more than 50% of the value of invoices in the US gets paid late, which is like, mind blowing if you think about it. And on the flip side, Melissa, you are very like to speak to a lot of people. I'm lucky from the perspective of having, to speak to clients or prospective clients from the product point of view. And many times, we talk about late payments and, ask the question, right? Do customers pay you on time? And the answer is many times, yeah. I mean, we don't have a problem with late payments. It's all good. And then you show them like a dashboard of how in the last 3 months who paid them late and by how many days, and they go, "This guy's paying me late."
I
And
agree.
we do something about it. So I think it's about creating creating the visibility at the end of the day, and the process around collections, even in a business that doesn't have maybe a dedicated staff that does purely collections, because it's also something that it's a nice to have in many cases.
Right.
After you sell, then you assume you're going to get paid and on time. But the fact is that late payers often pay consistently. That's one thing, that there is predictability, and there are reasons, right? There's poor organization. There's they're managing their own cash flow. They have preferred payment methods they won't prioritize, and so on and so forth, or preferred vendors they won't prioritize. So our perspective is that first of all, it's not nuclear science, obviously, but it's about connecting the dots, right? And doing this again in a proactive manner, having being able to deploy simple technologies and processes to first of all predict late payments. We talked about this a number of times. Predicting late payments, it is important because it has direct impact on cash flow. Keep the invoices top of mind. Sometimes, many times, people just send out an invoice which might just get lost in the mail, right? It might get lost in the email. It might go to junk. So, keeping an invoice top of mind, reminding them that there's an invoice due, not only waiting until 90 days later to figure out that you need to pick up the phone to call them. Giving people payment options, like it's crazy. I come from the UK, and in the UK everything is electronic. Everybody pays using faster payments. I haven't seen a check for 10 years now, but still checks are a reality and a huge part of the volume in the US. So giving people better options to pay, giving different options based on the timing of the invoice, for example, giving electronic payments as an option, giving credit card as an option. These things are things that can drive a payment coming in faster, because you also catch the other team at the right point at the right time. So the way I imagine it, and I come back again to the parallel around the CRM, having like a CRM now in the collections, in the AR space, that can help you really smoothen that journey, that workflow, right? From sending out an invoice to predicting a payment when it's going to be late, understanding the impact on cash flow, reminding people about when it's going to get about the payment being due or overdue, and changing your tone and voice depending on how late it is, and then having the proper communication channel, right? Because at the end of the day, sometimes you need to get other people involved. You need to get the sales guy involved. You need to get the CFO, the CEO, the owner involved in this process. So why do this in a siloed way when you can actually have it in a very systematic process that can adapt into a very small business that doesn't have anybody dedicated doing that, but can also adapt into a business that has like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 dedicated staff doing this. There's a spectrum of businesses, and the reality is that technology can address many different types of businesses depending on the life cycle and how much they've already invested in this process. So I think it's about, again, it's about bringing technology in smartly to complement, create the visibility into the teams, into the people, and creating that connecting all the dots around late payments. And at the end of the day, you know what? Like, nobody can promise that late payments will cease to exist, but at least have a handle over them. Like, look at have the visibility, understand the potential impact, and establish as much as possible the processes to drive better payment cadence from customers. That's kind of our 2 cents on why we're doing this. I don't know, Melissa. One question I have for you is: first of all, do you see that need in your clients? Number one, and two, do you think that having what is the role a CPA, an advisor, can play in the collections process, in the AR process?
So even with me and my current role with some of my clients, if anything, they want me to be the collections person and figure out cash and negotiate all their deals. Yeah, they want me to do everything. But to your point, the only way I can do that is either to do it, to come up with something quicker, information gathering, whether it's through a dashboard, through automation. That's the key thing. But also not relying so much on invoices. Like, people already know what they're going to pay their vendors. People know that something's going to come up. If you can forecast that and add that into your analysis, you don't have to wait for the invoices that are late. You should already know the services that you're providing or getting, from other people. So that's the things that I would change from at least an advisory standpoint, is being ahead of the game and making sure that you can provide the business quick solutions on their cash.
Great, thank you. Our next question is: AP often comes in low on the list of priorities. Are there opportunities for businesses to improve cash flow through supplier payments? And how important is it to link supplier payments with cash flow? Melissa, can you please start us off with that one?
Yeah, I think AP comes just on the lower part of the list because it's known, right? You go through an automation process, the invoice gets posted, it goes through an approval workflow, and your manager will approve it, and then you push the button, right, to make a payment. It's done. But then there's no connection to what is actually happening on the other end with operations or how the business is working through cash. So of course, I think it has to be integrated because otherwise you won't know what people are spending, what vendors are being, brought in or procured, right? So if anything, the improvement is just a full stop solution to make sure that it's integrated. You can see both ends of the cash spectrum and working from there. What do you think?
Sergio, what do you think on this one?
I agree, Melissa, with your point. I think the reality is that AP is not the most sexy part of any business.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's fundamental, and it's a central function, both from a control standpoint as well as from a cash flow standpoint, and also obviously keeping great relation with vendors who you will really need when the time comes. So I think whilst they're not, I haven't been able to gather public stats on this, and I'm looking. The reality is that many payments either don't treat payables as a very strategic function, right? And that means that they are looking at it as a process, but not interconnected to the cash flow side of things and unlocking working capital through payables. So to give an example, like if you run, let's say, payment runs every couple of weeks, and you just do this on a Friday and you send out all your payments on a Friday, many times you end up like paying suppliers maybe 2 or 3 days earlier than what you should be. But if you take that and you amount it throughout the course of the year, that is thousands of dollars of cash flow, just being wasted because you don't have a process to connect the two aspects. So the other two aspects of AP is early payment discounts, which is it's a huge thing in the market, but it's not properly leveraged by many businesses because they don't have the visibility. I mean, take the example of QuickBooks, for example, does not give you the ability to set early payment discount terms, which is mental if you think about it. But early payment discounts can create a revenue stream from a very non-sexy function, which is AP, and create a bottom line. So, but to get to early payment discounts, you need to understand whether you can do that from a cash flow point of view, right? Because you're not going to pay early if you don't have the cash to do it. And that's about your point from the early on, Melissa. It's about it's about maximizing the cash you have at hand. And also another interesting aspect around AP is how still obviously how check payments are used, but let's not open that Pandora's box. But how, credit cards are not really used within the B2B, the AP process for B2B payments. And, credit cards are such a great way to unlock working capital. I mean, you pay by credit card, you have to pay back in 30, 40, 50 days if it's a proper credit card. So that creates float. And also, it can also mitigate the impact or the effect of late payments, because when you pay on a credit card, even if it costs something your supplier, it is because you need to do that, right? So you will make the payment, your supplier will get the money, but you won't pay, and you won't pay them 20, 30, 40 days later. So credit cards, it's like still very early stage, but it's a key tool within the AP process, and it's at the end of the day free working capital for the payer. So I think all these parts means that, for me, it means that AP could definitely benefit from being considered as a more strategic function, as opposed to just a process which you described, Melissa, which is you get a bill in, you approve the bill, you send the bill, you schedule the bill for your next payment run, you get the approval, you send it out by check. There's a lot more there that can be leveraged, we think. And an aha moment we get many times, and Melissa, we discussed this a few days ago, is when you actually connect AP and cash flow, and when you are able to create a payment run, schedule payments on different payment methods, on different timings, and see the impact on cash flow live, that's the aha moment we get with many of our clients. Do you think it's important to kind of have these two silos break and be more interconnected?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the whole point, is making sure that not only are you using just your accounting system, right, to provide the numbers for you, but really plugging and playing and making sure that you're telling a full picture through cash flow connection, right? And it's really just looping in AR, AP, definitely credit cards. Credit cards is a way that a lot of businesses are moving towards. And so that's usually just one bulk payment sometimes, but you don't know what's actually happening, right, in the details. So it's important to bridge all those components together.
Totally. I think the only thing that I'll add there just is, I think a lot of times when folks are going through AP, they might not be looking at their actual cash balance. They're just looking at due dates, what things are overdue or not, and going from there, opposed to being strategic, right? If things are all in a holistic view, you can say, hey, let's propose this AP run because we'll have this ending cash balance, because we know these receivables, which are usually paid late, are going to be coming up on due here. So I think that all of that pulled together is just a great way to understand and look at the AP cycle, opposed to just looking at it as a segregated section of the business.
100%. Agreed, Nick. And you talked about AR as well, right? Which comes into the picture because you look at AR, you look at AP, you look at the resulting, and then you make those decisions. 100% agree with you.
Right. And I think to your point, though, the whole part of having a system that can do that, because if on their own, they're all separate, and you need to really be looking in 3 different places, 3 different reports, potentially different systems. But if you can have one system that pulls all the data in, it can really, really be super powerful, and it can allow you to make a lot of those decisions and be able to look at one screen, drill in and get the details, opposed to being like this Excel, that Excel, this month, that month, all these different things.
So I think what we also wanted to talk about a bit is, we did touch on QuickBooks and the general ledger throughout the discussion a few times, but obviously what is your perspective about the whole ecosystem around QuickBooks, and how you can basically, as the webinar says, supercharge QuickBooks to get better results from a cash flow management standpoint? What's your perspective, Melissa?
No, a great question. QuickBooks, to me, even from an accounting standpoint, is just a processing tool, right? That spits out a good financial statement, a good AR aging, a good AP aging. It doesn't necessarily give me the full picture in a nice dashboard to give me, again, the cash flow forecasting tools that we need. So I leverage off of different apps to make sure that I can get what I need from a different industry perspective, a different management perspective, because people think differently, right? A lot of people want visuals, or a lot of people just want true data. So you have to find the right tool to make the right decision for your business. And so not only do I use QuickBooks as the ecosystem, but something has to connect to it to really give you the full picture, to run your business in a optimal way.
Yeah. I mean, no, please, Nick.
No, I was just to say, I completely agree there. I think it's QuickBooks and can be kind of the foundation and give you the static data, and it can give you some good reports, but the ability to just have plugins, have other applications that can pull the data together and help you look at it from that holistic view is just super important, but that's the nice flexibility of having QuickBooks.
Yeah. I mean, look, you said it, Melissa, QuickBooks is an amazing tool. It's an amazing business, an amazing tool. It's like the dominant general ledger in the market, and it's like really serving small businesses. But it's purpose built for a very specific case, which is bookkeeping, tax, audit, reporting, etc., etc. It is the system of record for a business from a financial point of view, and what we know is that if records are not kept straight, CFOs can go to jail in public companies and in large, private companies. So it's an extremely important part of the business. But how you can augment QuickBooks is by introducing a system of engagement, and that's how we see what we are trying to do, which is bring a collaborative workspace that takes the data from the system of record and shines a light on what to do next, what will happen next, and what should I do next. Who should I call first? Which customer is going to pay me late? How should I juggle my payments so I can get paid from the receivable and then have the closing balance to make my payroll on Friday? These are the kind of decisions that QuickBooks is not meant to give, and is not built to do out of the box. And that's where the ecosystem of QuickBooks, and that's where our place as Centeam is to complement it, to provide that strategic insight to any business or a CPA, but in a very simple way, right? Because if you create complexity and if you create clutter, you can never get the proper insight that you need. You need to always have access to the detail in the background, but if you don't create this in a neat way for everybody to understand, then you won't be successful. So the combination of QuickBooks plus a system of engagement from a cash flow management point of view, plus an outsourced CFO, a CPA, or an analyst like you, Nick, we think that gives real-time insights about how a business can manage and control cash flow. And one more point, I think, which is we hear a lot, is that because it is a system of engagement, because it is a system of record, it's also very it needs to be very secure. And what we're finding is that many business leaders, many finance teams, many CPAs, their priority or their preference would be to not give access to QuickBooks to anybody, because the reality is that when you access QuickBooks, you can do a lot of things in there. So, and that's where having a very clear segregation between the bookkeeping and the auditing side of things and the day-to-day operational processes is where we think that through a proper permissions, very granular way of setting up the roles for the people who manage, can forecast, can create a cash flow forecast, can schedule payments, can approve payments, can see the impact on cash flow, can look at the holistic picture. That granular permission and that distinct access to the system of engagement and separating that from the system of record is very important.
Thank you, Sergio, Melissa, and Nick, for your amazing presentation. And thanks everyone in the audience for joining us today for this excellent webinar. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.